Residents stoned cars and burned tyres in the street outside the local police station in protest. Could the community have reacted early to the disappearance of the toddlers? Now, to answer some of these questions, we joined in studio by Motlalepule Nathane-Taulela, a lecturer at the Department of Social Department at Wits University here in Johannesburg. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Now, if we look at this case, in the spate of rape and murder on children, is this a real social problem for South Africa right now?
It is a social problem and a serious one, and I think as a country we need to pay serious attention to it, because not only are we hearing of a few cases, we're hearing of more cases, and it's a countrywide situation. And for me, the reason why we need to pay attention to it is because these perpetrators are members of our society. They are our brothers, they are sisters, they are uncles. So we need to pay attention to this problem, and the fact that why are young people or children, hurt in this manner?
Who should take responsibility for these crimes committed by these, shall we call them perpetrators, against these children? Is it the parents or is it the community at large?
Okay, I think child protection is everyone's responsibility. Therefore, as a society, we need to take responsibility. But I need to emphasize and say parents. Parental supervision and parental responsibility in this case becomes very important. But we have to bear in mind the realities of most parents in South Africa. The fact that many of these mothers are single women and they have to work, so they are faced with serious challenges. So it's very important that we create support systems in our community, and that will act as safety networks to protect these children.
Now, if you say safety networks, we're talking about safety networks in the community, isn't it? Because sometimes the question could be asked, have we lost that sense of Ubuntu within our communities?
I think we have, but there's not one way of explaining why individuals perpetrate and violate children in this manner. We need to look at the structural disadvantages and the impoverished living conditions that some of these people are coming from. And I'm not saying the perpetrators are specifically coming from impoverished living conditions, but these are deep-seated issues within individuals, feelings of anger, revenge, and helplessness. And who are the targets in this case? Young, vulnerable children who cannot protect themselves, And for you to understand why this is happening is because at the time, this perpetrator, is not necessarily looking at that child as a child. This is just an object of anger, a target of their anger,
Now, what should parents or could do to safeguard and protect their children while they're at work, while they're doing all these sorts of things, to make sure that at least bread and butter on the table?
Parental supervision, and always making sure that children are cared for or children are left under supervision of a responsible adult. And also, not only that, but to create support systems around in our community and making sure that you know where your child is. Because the reality is in South Africa, we have not really taken child protection seriously. We know of cases and children who are begging in street corners. You ask yourself, who, in terms of the parents, as a parent, who do you think your children are at that particular point in time? And the important message for me is to say to parents, if you're not paying attention to your child, ask yourself who's paying attention to your child, because these people make sure that they gain trust. For an example, looking at the specific case in Diepsloot, it is possible that the perpetrator was known to children. So we need, as parents, to start giving our children the correct messages. We often say to children, do not talk to strangers, but research shows that in reality, it's the people who are known to children who will have these children. So it's very important that we talk to our children, we give them right messages, and also we go back to the issue of every child is my child.
Yes.
And you protect, you care. If you care enough to ask, if you see children playing in unsafe places like dumping areas, you need to ask, you need to do something. So I think the challenge is we have somehow lost that Ubuntu, but there are certain things. And one thing that I really want to emphasize, in cases where a child has disappeared, it is very important for community at that particular time, in the first 3 hours, to create a crisis. And by creating a crisis, I don't mean a manhunt, but to ask around, because when you look at all the cases, children were found in the vicinity, in the area. So it is likely that if members of society went door to door at that particular moment to look for these children, we could have found these children alive.
So that 3 hours is very important.
3 hours, the first 3 hours
and
is
not
very
24
important.
hours as the police normally indicate.
The police will always say 24 hours, but the chances are we know in 24 hours we will, in most cases, find the child dead, you know. So it's very important the first 3 hours, create a crisis, knock at every door, you know. And I know in these communities there are practices of blowing a whistle or blowing a vuvuzela to create attention and say, there's a problem, we need to ask around. So if we take that action in the first 3 hours, we can help some of these kids.
In our days, many years ago, we could play in the streets until very late, and we would only come home when we are hungry. What has changed over the years?
Well, I think what has changed is one, I will point out the issue of individualism. We are becoming more individuals. You know, your problem is your problem. If I see a child, you know, in danger, some people might say it's not my business. But the reality is we need to go back. And as to whether we will go back as society, I don't know. But we need to be aware that things have changed. Pedophiles, sexual violators, you know, are out there. So you need to be very careful as parents. You need to make sure that you know where your child is at all times.
Thank you so much for your time right here in
Thanks
studio for joining us. That is Motlalepule Nathane-Taulela, a lecturer at the Department of Social Services at Wits University.